think the alarm bells for emerging markets has been ringing for quite a while.
During the 2010s, Sri Lanka had one of the fastest growing economies in Asia. Things took a 180-degree turn at the end of the decade, says the article from MSNBC. As the country's economy stumbled, in May 2022, the government defaulted on its debt for the first time in history as inflation continued to spiral out of control like a loose train. With a massive shortage of food, fuel, and medicine for the country's 22 million people, Sri Lankans took to the streets in protest, and the city has been in unrest since. Many experts believe that Sri Lanka's story is a warning sign for the emerging markets. Pakistan is not well with its economy. Last week, the country reached an agreement with the IMF to rescue its loan program since last year's serious economic crisis. Nepal, the Himalayan nation, is seeing a rise in imports even as the forex reserves deplete and there is growing imbalance in the balance of the payments to their debt. Egypt, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 95%, has experienced one of the largest outflows of foreign funds this year, totaling $11 billion, according to JP Morgan. Argentina, with the global inflation rising and their fear of recession, I say depression, looming very large, its economy is heading for major trouble. Nigeria. The World Bank recently listed this country amongst the top 10 in the world with the worst inflation since Zimbabwe, Weimar Republic, and Venezuela together. Kenya is among other African nations at the brink of collapse. Ethiopia owes 3 times as much debt to the private creditors in the West as they do owe to China. Wow. Panama. Year-on-year inflation of 4.2% was record high in May, along with unemployment, fuel price hikes, and the highest rate of social inequality. Albania marched in the capital city of Tirana, demanding the government resign because of alleged corruption and a massive increase in consumer prices. And this is just the beginning, editor. Roll clip. Fair use. Show us some more. Show us what's going on outside the U.S. We really need to see this.
69 countries that face all the 3 risks: food, energy, finance, all 3. 69 countries could go the Sri Lanka way. 25 in Africa, 25 in the Asia Pacific, and 19 in Latin America. Which countries are these? We'll start with Egypt, the land of pharaohs. It is in the throes of a financial crisis. Egypt is the world's largest importer of wheat. Russia and Ukraine were its top suppliers. As they fight now, the supplies are running out. Last month, Egypt said that its wheat reserves will not last more than 3 months. Next, we have Tunisia, the birthplace of the Arab Spring. Its economy is overheating. Foreign debt accounts for 100% of its GDP. The trade deficit has widened to $800 million. Inflation stands at 7%. Fuel prices at record highs. Experts say Tunisia could soon face civil unrest. The same warning has been issued for Lebanon, the Switzerland of West Asia. Well, not anymore. In 2020, the Beirut blasts destroyed Lebanon's largest grain stores. Food prices went up by 11 times. The Lebanese pound lost 90% of its value. Public debt grew to 360% of the GDP. The war in Ukraine complicated things further. Lebanon imported 80% of its wheat from Ukraine. Those supplies have fallen. There's a bread shortage, a scarcity of sunflower oil. Lebanon has been forced to take a $150 million loan from the World Bank to ensure food security. Then we have Argentina, the land of tango, also caught on the wrong foot now. Inflation is paralyzing its economy. External debt is mounting. Argentina has defaulted on debt repayments 9 times. To avoid a 10th default, it has gone to the IMF. It wants to refinance a $45 billion loan. It may give Argentina a brief reprieve, but it will not quell the civil unrest. Analysts say Argentina is staring at a long and cold winter this year. Some other Latin American countries are also at risk, like El Salvador and Peru. They face hyperinflation in commodities, tumbling bonds, food shortages, detonating prices, and mass unemployment. Very much like Sri Lanka. Reports say both countries could soon face civil unrest. In sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Ethiopia could be the worst hit. In Ghana, debt levels are soaring. Interest payments are choking the economy. A debt crisis looks imminent. In Kenya, the debt has climbed to $70 billion. That's 70% of its GDP. Last week, they got a $244 million loan from the IMF to weather this economic storm. In South Africa, the debt has reached 80% of its GDP. There's a looming threat of state collapse, a rerun of the 2021 civil unrest. Next comes Turkey. The currency is sliding, the debt is soaring, upwards of 54% of the GDP. Inflation has touched 70%. GDP forecast cut to 3.3%. There's a food shortage. Turkey is getting 50,000 tons of wheat from India. And these were just a few examples. The World Bank says that in the next 12 months, as many as a dozen developing economies may not be able to service their debt. This will be the largest debt crisis in a generation. What about India? It will feel the impact. A few state economies are already inching towards a debt crisis. In Punjab, West Bengal, Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, the debt to GDP ratio is identical to Sri Lanka's. On the 3rd of April, Indian bureaucrats expressed concern. They said populist measures in these states could ruin their economies and leave them broke like Sri Lanka. Now, here's the thing. The entire world is in debt distress. National budgets are at breaking point. Some governments are being forced to cut spending. Others are borrowing more to stay afloat.
What's changing now is that we're coming out of this low interest rate environment. Interest rates are going to be higher going forward, and many of these emerging markets will have foreign currency denominated or dollar denominated debt. And the dollar is strengthening because of the current monetary policy regime in the US. So all of these, together with a few idiosyncratic shocks, could make another emerging market go into crisis. And the next one might not be a relatively small country like Sri Lanka.
The Sri Lankan crisis is a sign to other countries in the world, especially other developing countries with high levels of debt and political instability, that things can go really wrong really quickly.
Hey guys, it's Jose, your regular Joe Blow again, keeping an eye out and my ears open to the world's current events affecting us and not talked about or shown here on mainstream media. Do your research. As always, I'll continue to do my best and bring you my best. Also bring you the scoop on how we can prepare ahead of time, since the gift that we're getting is information. Guys, thank you for the support. As always, stay free.
It ain't hard to tell. I excel, then prevail.